Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, think about this for a second. You're just, chatting with a friend,
Okay.
right? In your own language. But even then, sometimes you don't quite catch everything they're saying. Maybe there's something subtle in their tone or an emotion that isn't quite spelled out. And suddenly you realize you're doing way more than just hearing words. You're decoding a whole lot.
Right, you're reading between the lines.
Exactly. Now, let's just layer on the complexity of trying to do that in a new language, like English as a foreign language, EFL. That challenge of really understanding someone, it becomes, well, a whole new ball game.
Absolutely.
So today we're doing a deep dive into listening comprehension. Specifically, how this really vital skill is understood and how it's taught in the EFL classroom. We'll be drawing on some pretty comprehensive educational research and teaching frameworks.
Yeah, the thinking has really evolved.
Our mission here is to unpack all the tricky bits of listening, moving way beyond just hearing. We'll explore how our brains actually process sound, the sort of surprising roles we play as listeners, and the strategies teachers use to build this skill. Hopefully you'll get a quick, solid understanding, maybe find some surprising facts, and have a few aha moments about what makes listening effective. When we talk communication, speaking usually gets all the attention.
It does, yeah.
But what about the receiving end? Turns out, listening isn't just fundamental. Some argue it might be the most important skill for actually interacting with society, getting our needs met.
And what's really fascinating, as you mentioned, is how the whole idea of listening has changed, especially since maybe the early 2000s. It's gone from being seen as, well, pretty passive,
Just soaking it up.
right, to something that's deeply interactive. So this dive really focuses on how we can teach listening effectively, keeping this new understanding in mind to really help students develop their listening abilities properly.
I find that shift totally fascinating, and it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Listening is just such a fundamental part of being communicatively competent. It's so tied up with speaking.
Completely reciprocal.
Yeah, like two sides of the same coin. Listening's the input, speaking's the output. You can't really have one without the other working well.
Exactly. And this new conception, as some call it, of listening as interactive, it's really gained ground. You've got linguists like McGregor, Mendelssohn, Lynch, Noonan. They've all developed this idea. It ties into something called collaborative discourse.
Okay, collaborative discourse.
Yeah, it's basically the idea, Gerlach talked about this, that learning is naturally social.
Yeah.
Real understanding often comes about through talking together. It's not just about passively absorbing information anymore.
That makes me wonder then, if listening is so active, does our actual role as a listener change what we hear? I mean, it's easy to just think listening is listening, but McGregor, way back in '86, laid out this really interesting continuum of listener roles. It's simplified, sure, but very insightful for real life.
Oh, it's a great framework because it shows just how nuanced listening can be. Think about it. You could be a participant in a chat, right? Equal speaking rights, like friends talking something over.
Yeah, back and forth.
Totally.
Yeah.
But then you could be an addressee. You're being spoken to, but you don't really have much right to jump in. Like a student in a very traditional lecture.
Right, you're expected to just listen.
Pretty much. Or think about a bus driver calling out stops. You're an auditor then, part of an audience, but no real expectation to respond.
Okay.
Then there's the overhearer. You're not being talked to at all, but you're close enough to hear, maybe like someone in line at the bank hearing the teller and customer, no rights, no expectation to
If you
respond.
just there.
Exactly. And finally, the judge. Someone who isn't being addressed directly, but their job is to evaluate the speaker or the message. Think of a juror.
Wow. Okay, so each role really shifts how you're engaging with the sound.
Fundamentally.
And it's not just those roles, is it? There are so many other things influencing us, like gender, age, social rules, how we're feeling, visual cues.
Body language, yeah?
Right, and the whole cultural context, all that stuff plays a part in how we understand or misunderstand.
And to sort of map out the process, Richards, back in '85, described listening as this kind of hierarchical mental dance. It's not just one step. First, you figure out the type of interaction, casual chat, formal speech.
Okay.
Then you pull up relevant mental scripts, your expectations for that situation, like a mental blueprint.
Gotcha.
Next, you try to infer what the speaker's actually trying to do. Then you figure out the literal meaning, the propositional meaning. Then you assign the speaker's intent, the illocutionary meaning, you hold on to the info you need, and crucially, you often let the exact original wording just fade away.
Wow, that's a lot happening very
It's
fast.
incredibly complex, yeah. A
Yeah.
rapid-fire cognitive process.
And that mental dance, that also connects to what some call humanistic or effective approaches in learning, doesn't it?
It does.
It highlights how much our individual preferences, whether we're actually interested in the topic, can make or break a listening activity for a learner. If you're bored or just don't care.
Your brain checks out.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this brings up a really critical point about authenticity
Oh.
in listening materials.
Authenticity.
Gite Pennier, way back in '84 actually, pointed out that even if you have a perfectly genuine recording of native speakers chatting, it might not create authenticity of purpose for the learner.
Authenticity of purpose, meaning.
Meaning, does it feel like real listening? She said real-life listening usually has certain features. We often have access to clues from the environment, right?
Yeah, like seeing who's talking.
Exactly. Information often comes in short bursts, not long monologues. There's usually some kind of reciprocity, give and take. And typically, we need to respond quite frequently, even just with a nod or an
Okay, so without those elements, even real English can feel kind of artificial in the classroom?
It can feel less engaging, less like the real deal, yeah.
Yeah.
Which impacts motivation and learning.
So, if listening is this interactive skill, usually happening with others, needing a response, it begs the question, how does our brain actually do it? How do we make sense of the sounds coming in? Lynch, you mentioned him earlier, he broke down the interaction into 3 different levels.
Yes, Lynch's levels are quite insightful. First, there's cognitive interaction. This is basically the interplay inside your head between different knowledge sources.
Like what?
Like your knowledge of the topic, your existing mental frameworks, linguists call these schemata.
Ah, the mental blueprints again.
Exactly. Plus the context of the situation, and of course your existing knowledge of the second language, the L2 vocabulary and grammar. It's all interacting.
Okay, cognitive interaction. What else?
Then there's behavioral interaction. This is how listening connects with the other skills, speaking, reading, writing. You listen, then you might speak in response, or write notes, or read something related.
Makes sense. They all work together.
And finally, social interaction. This is the interaction happening in face-to-face settings, the social dynamics of the conversation. And as Morley pointed out, all of this means our interpretation of what we hear is constantly being shaped by our personal store of background knowledge.
Right, what we already know influences what we understand. So let's drill down a bit more. How does the brain actually mechanically process the sounds?
Well, generally we talk about 2 key cognitive processing levels. The first is bottom-up processing.
Bottom up, okay.
Think of it like building understanding from the ground floor. You use the low-level clues. Learners start by identifying individual sounds, then piecing them into words, then joining words into phrases and sentences, and eventually understanding the whole text.
So starting small and building up.
Precisely. Activities that focus on this include things like fill in the gaps, or maybe dictogloss, where the focus is on catching specific sounds and words. But crucially, for these to work well, the sentences need to be spoken naturally, not dictated slowly, word by word.
Right, needs to sound like real speech. What's the other approach?
The other is top-down processing. Here, the listener uses their bigger picture knowledge.
Like the background knowledge we talked about.
Exactly. General world knowledge, knowledge about the specific topic, sociocultural understanding, knowledge about how conversations usually go. Use all that, plus the immediate situation, to predict and understand. You anticipate what's likely to come next.
Ah, so using context and expectations. That sounds like a really important real-life skill.
It's vital.
Yeah.
Activities like predicting what a recording will be about just from the title or a picture, those really help develop this top-down skill. Guessing meaning, anticipating, that's what we do all the time.
And you mentioned the response earlier. It's not just about understanding in your head. The response itself is a core part of the listening process.
Absolutely integral.
Yeah.
Responding isn't just about showing you understood. It enables the communication to continue. It builds respect between speakers. It allows people to express feelings and opinions.
Yeah, it keeps the conversation alive.
And it encourages information to surface, sometimes creating a safer space where people feel comfortable enough to, say, solve a problem together. It's very dynamic.
Thinking about where all this happens,
Yeah.
you mentioned context. The Common European Framework, the CEFR, talks about different domains of listening, right?
That's right. They identify 4 broad interactive domains. There's the public domain, general social interactions using public services, that sort of thing.
Okay.
The personal domain, family life, friendships, individual social stuff. Then the occupational domain, which is all about work and professional life.
It makes sense.
And finally, the educational domain. That's learning and training contexts, often focused on acquiring specific knowledge or skills, like in a classroom. The type of listening can differ quite a bit across these domains.
Okay, so putting this all together for teaching. Field's framework from 2002, the pre-listening, listening, and post-listening stages. That seems like a really practical, logical way to structure things in the classroom.
It is. It's very widely used and effective. The pre-listening stage is all about setting the scene. Now, in real life, nobody pre-teaches you vocabulary before a chat.
No, definitely not.
But in the classroom, it's useful. Its purpose is to help students anticipate tricky words, establish the context, maybe get them interested and motivated.
So what kinds of activities?
Oh, quick things. Defining a few key words in pairs, maybe a quick brainstorm on the topic, a word web, even miming an action related to the listening. The key is they should be brief, ideally under 5 minutes. You don't want to give the whole listening text away.
Right, just warm them up. Then comes the main event, listening, the while listening part.
Exactly. And like we said, in real life, we listen for a reason. Our attitude can shift. Lund's taxonomy from 1990 is really helpful here. It outlines like 9 different ways you can approach a listening activity based on the listener function, what they're trying to process, and the listener response, what they do to show understanding.
Okay, so it's not just listen and understand.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Listener functions could range from just identification, like picking out names or places, to orientation, figuring out the context, or who's talking, all the way up to main idea comprehension, or even full comprehension.
And the responses, how they show it.
Again, huge variety. It could be doing something physical, like in Simon Says, or choosing from options, like in Guess Who.
Yeah.
Maybe transferring info, like drawing a map based on directions, answering questions, obviously, condensing, like summarizing or note-taking, even extending the text, like predicting an ending.
Wow, lots of options.
Yeah. So in designing a task, teachers need to think about what's the function, what's the response, what kind of text, what topic, how will it be presented? 5 key things.
Okay, and after they've listened, the post-listening stage.
Right, or classroom listening performances.
Yeah.
This is where you consolidate the learning, check understanding, maybe link it to other skills. You've got various types here too.
Like what?
Well, reacting activities might just be drilling pronunciation, listen, and repeat. Responsive activities involve short, specific answers, responding to commands, or simple questions.
Okay.
Selective activities are about scanning for specific details, names, dates, key ideas, like an eavesdropping exercise almost.
Listening for something specific.
Exactly. Extensive activities aim for more global understanding, often with longer texts like lectures, maybe involving note-taking, that's more top-down. And then interactive activities, which are crucial discussions, role plays, group work, where learners really use the language they've been listening to.
And throughout all this, using real objects and authentic material seems really important.
Absolutely vital. It exposes learners to real accents, natural expressions, even the ums and ahs, the fillers, everything they'll actually encounter outside the classroom. Prepares them for real communication.
Now let's tackle something that's often a huge hurdle for English learners. The sound system, the phonology.
Ah, yes, the tricky part.
It's notoriously difficult, isn't it? Because English spelling is, well, chaotic sometimes. Vowels and consonants often sound very different from how they're written. Think laughter versus daughter.
Completely different vowel sounds, same spelling pattern.
Right, and that's largely because English has borrowed from so many languages, Latin, Germanic, Greek, French. It's a real mix. And then there's word stress, which can actually change a word's meaning and pronunciation, like present the noun versus present the verb.
That unpredictability is definitely a major challenge. When we talk phonology, we often look at the suprasegmental level first. These are features above individual sounds. Pitch, intonation, stress.
Okay, so pitch.
Pitch is the highness or lowness of the voice. It carries a lot of information. Mood, emotion, attitude, even how you end a sentence with pitch can vary between, say, Australian and American English.
Interesting. And intonation.
Intonation is the melody, the rise and fall of the voice across a phrase or sentence. It's essential for understanding expressions, thoughts, telling a question from a statement, showing surprise or doubt. There's grammatical intonation like rising for yes-no questions, falling for way questions usually, and attitudinal intonation where the tune shows feeling. Teaching it is tricky though because it's so context-dependent.
And stress. You mentioned that earlier.
Stress is huge in English. It's often unpredictable where the main stress falls on a word, but generally it falls on content words, nouns, main verbs, adjectives, adverbs. These carry the main message, the advantage. Stressed words are usually clearer, easier to hear. So training students to listen for the stress is really important. It helps them find the core meaning.
Okay, so listening for the beat, almost.
In a way, yes.
Yes.
Which brings us to another common issue. Students often say some English words just seem to disappear or are really hard to catch.
Yeah, I've heard that complaint.
This is often down to gradation and the schwa sound. Remember how content words are usually stressed? Well, grammatical words, prepositions, auxiliary verbs, pronouns are often unstressed. They get weakened.
Weakened how?
They often reduce to the schwa sound. It's the most relaxed, neutral vowel sound in English. Think about the word can. If I say, yes, I can, it's strong can. But in I can go, it's often weak gelnin. I can go.
Ah, okay. It gets swallowed up a bit.
Exactly. So a good tip is often to teach the weak form first, how it sounds in a normal sentence, and then introduce the strong form.
That makes sense. What else makes connected speech tricky?
Well, related to weak forms is elision. This is where sounds or even whole syllables or words get omitted to make speech smoother and faster. Classic is, I don't know, often becoming a disney or even, I don't know.
Right.
Learners, especially those without much contact with native speakers, can easily miss these elided bits. They're listening for a word that isn't fully there.
So it sounds like words are missing.
It can, yeah. And then there's just connected speech and linking in general. Native speakers don't usually pause between every word. We link them together, and sounds often change at the boundaries. What are you going to do? Can sound like one smooth block. What you going to do?
Definitely sounds faster.
It allows for efficient rhythmic speech, but for learners, it can make it hard to tell where one word ends and the next begins. It feels like one solid chunk of sound.
Okay, wow. So lots of challenges there. Are there specific issues for, say, Spanish speakers?
Yes, definitely. At the individual sound level, a segmental level, English has sounds that just don't exist in Spanish, like the vowels in cat's butt or burgess, and of course the schwa. This leads to common confusion, like mixing up cat and cut.
I could see that.
Distinguishing long and short vowels is also tricky, like pool, you, versus coal or sheep eye, versus ship,
Hmm.
and their sound at the end of words often isn't pronounced in many English varieties, like carteft, which is different from Spanish.
Right.
But maybe the biggest thing, as we touched on with stress, is rhythm. English is stress-timed. The rhythm is based on the stressed syllables. Spanish is syllable-timed, where each syllable gets roughly equal time. This difference makes English sound very choppy or rushed to Spanish speakers, and it's a huge hurdle for both listening comprehension and speaking fluency.
Okay, that's a really key difference. This all raises a super important question, though. Do you actually need to understand every single word someone says in English?
Ah, the million-dollar question.
Right, because it feels like you should, but...
The good news is, most of the time, absolutely not. It's crucial to teach learners not to panic if they miss words. Focus on the overall message, the gist.
Are there times when every word does matter?
Sure, there are a few high-stakes situations, maybe a safety announcement or, like you said, a train announcement where missing one word means you miss your stop. But honestly, in most conversations, most listening situations, understanding the key points and the overall meaning is enough. Don't sweat the small stuff.
That's really reassuring advice. Okay, so building on that idea of getting the gist and working with how language naturally flows, let's talk practical activities again. How can we integrate listening with other skills, especially speaking, to make it more dynamic?
Great question. Integration is key. One really effective activity is jigsaw listening.
Jigsaw listening.
Yeah, it's an information gap task. You divide a listening text into parts. Different groups of students listen to different parts. Then they have to get together and share their information to complete a task, like filling out a full story or solving a puzzle.
Ah, so they have to listen carefully to their part and then they have to speak to share it.
Exactly. It forces active listening and meaningful speaking. It can be a bit tricky to set up logistically, but it's very powerful.
What else?
Well, the use of computers in language labs, where schools have them, is great. They offer chances to work with authentic materials, practice individually or in groups, maybe record themselves speaking. It creates a more immersive environment.
Tech can definitely help.
For sure. And don't underestimate video clips, lyrics, and songs. Pop music especially is usually a huge hit.
Oh, yes, students love music.
Totally.
Right.
And if you add things like sing-alongs, it really boosts motivation and gets them participating, practicing pronunciation in a fun way.
Nice. Any other ideas?
Board games. They're fantastic for combining listening command, maybe understanding instructions or questions on cards, with spoken interaction as players talk and compete. And the great thing is, teachers can easily customize them to focus on specific vocabulary or grammar or just match student interests.
Okay, lots of ways to make it active and engaging. Now, shifting gears slightly, evaluating listening comprehension. That sounds inherently tricky, doesn't it? Since so much happens inside the listener's head.
It is nuanced. Definitely. You can't directly see the comprehension process. So the first step for a teacher is always to be really clear about the purpose of the listening activity they're assessing. Are they checking for gist, specific details, overall understanding?
Right, what are you actually trying to measure?
Exactly. Then you pick the right tool. If you're focused on specific items, those post-listening tasks we mentioned, like selective activities, finding details, or maybe short responsive answers, can work well.
Okay. But what about tracking progress over time?
For looking at a student's overall development, many educators feel a diagnostic test at the beginning of a term or course, maybe combined with a more summative evaluation at the end, is the best approach. It lets you see the growth, the journey.
So pre and post assessment.
Kinda, yeah. There are comprehensive frameworks, like Hewitt's integral evaluation table, that classify different types of assessment from informal teacher observations and student self-evaluation, right up to formal class tests and external exams like Cambridge or IELTS. The most important thing is that the assessment method matches what's actually been taught and practiced. And honestly, often the most reliable tests for classroom use are the ones provided in good quality teachers' books, as they're usually well aligned with the course material.
Okay, so it requires a thoughtful approach, matching the assessment to the goal.
Precisely.
So, wow, we've covered a lot of ground. We started with realizing listening is way more than just hearing, it's active and interactive. We looked at how our brains use bottom-up and top-down processes. We explored practical teaching frameworks pre, while, post-listening, and the huge variety of activities. And we dove into the specific, often tricky phonological challenges of English. It's clear that really understanding listening requires a structured, informed approach.
It really does.
Hmm.
And if I could distill some key takeaways, maybe some final tips for anyone trying to improve their listening, whether in class or on their own.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. First, don't skip pre-listening activities. They really do prime your brain. Second, try to know how many times you'll hear a recording in a test or activity. It helps you strategize. Third, make sure instructions are super clear, both written and spoken. Don't guess what you're supposed to do.
Good point.
Fourth, don't ignore titles or any introductory info they provide crucial context. Fifth, maybe start with extensive listening for schist before tackling intensive listening for details. Get the big picture first.
Build confidence.
Exactly. Sixth, in a learning context, you should ideally only be tested on activity types you've practiced. No surprises. Seventh, during assessment, you shouldn't lose points for minor grammar or spelling errors in your answers if the meaning is correct and shows you understood the listening part.
That's fair.
And finally, always recognize that environmental conditions matter. A noisy room, bad acoustics. They genuinely make listening harder. So control your environment if you can when practicing.
Those are really practical, excellent tips. Thank you. It leaves me with a final thought for you, the listener. If listening, as we've explored, is really about active engagement, making inferences, understanding context, and not just catching every single sound, then what does this deep dive suggest about how you might approach understanding any kind of new, complex information in your life? How could applying this deep listening mindset, this focus on context and underlying meaning, transform your own learning and interactions way beyond just learning a language?
That's a great question to ponder.
Something to think about. We encourage you to reflect on these insights, maybe try applying some of them in your daily life and see what happens.